Okay, so we're moving on to presentation 2 of construction of the quadrilaterals on page 207. I should point out that in the album, they present from page 204 all the way to 209 as one presentation. And I think there are too many concepts lumped together to be effective. So I have broken up this one presentation into, I think 3 or 4. All right, so just make that note in your album. All right, so presentation 2 is starting at page 207 on step 9. Okay, all right. So we come back to the same quadrilaterals that we built before, and of course you would do a quick review of all the terminology. And again, I want to talk a little bit about how they differ and how they're the same. And the wording is going to be a little bit different here than before. So I want to point out to the students that, of course, they're all quadrilaterals, right? Because they're all 4-sided figures, all right? The trapezoid has exactly one pair of parallel lines. The common quadrilateral has no parallel lines. Okay, and all the other figures, except for the common quadrilateral, have at least one pair of parallel lines. Right? Actually, the trapezoid is the only one that has only one pair of parallel lines. The other 4 all have 2 pairs of parallel lines. Okay, so I want to point out a couple of relationships here. The square is actually a special kind of rectangle. Okay, the square happens to be a rectangle whose sides are all equal. All right. Okay. The square is also a special type of rhombus, or a special type of parallelogram, where it happens to be that the angles are all right angles and the sides are all equal. Okay, so the rhombus is also a special type of parallelogram where all the sides are equal. Right? The rectangle is also a special kind of parallelogram where all the angles are right angles. Okay, so there's lots of different relationships here, and we're going to use different colored yarns to try to group these things together. Okay, I do want to point out to you as a note to the teachers is that different people will classify these things a little bit differently. You may find sources that classify parallelograms as types of trapezoids. I'm just giving you what I think is the most common and most logical way of looking at it. Okay, so I want to take a look at all the figures here. What can I say about all the figures? What is the same for all these shapes? And yes, of course, what is the same for all these shapes is that they're all quadrilaterals. So I'm going to take some white yarn and I'm going to put it around the entire thing. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that, but don't worry because we're going to redo it on paper in a minute and it'll be a lot clearer. All right, so we have our first sort of categorization. They're all quadrilaterals, all right? Okay, then I want to look at the trapezoid. Okay, the trapezoid, I'm going to put it by itself right here inside the quadrilaterals, but all by itself because it is the only shape that has exactly one pair of parallel lines. Okay. Now, the parallelograms, I'm going to take this right here. This is a parallelogram. That's a parallelogram, as we said. It just happens to have 4 right angles. This is a parallelogram. It just happens to have 4 equal sides. And this is a parallelogram. It just happens to have 4 equal sides and right angles. Okay? So I can take this yarn and place it around all the parallelograms. Okay, and this should still be inside the white because they are all quadrilaterals. So I'm going to try and place it inside the white. Okay, there we go. All right, let's make sure this red is inside the white. Okay, next I want to look at the rectangles. Okay, well, we said that a square is just a special type of rectangle. Happens to be a rectangle that is equal on all sides. All right, so I'm going to put my green yarn around the square and the rectangle. All right, and I'm also going to put a yellow yarn around the rhombus and the square because we said a square is not only a certain type of parallelogram, it's also a certain type of rhombus. It just happens to have all 4 angles, right angles. All right, so we've done our classifications. This is a little bit difficult. Actually, I also wanted to put something just around the square. The square is all by itself in a category. All right, it happens to be a parallelogram with all sides equal, all angles equal angular, equilateral. Okay, I want to do the same thing now on paper so that the students can copy it into their notebooks more clearly. All right, so I'm actually going to take away the yarn, okay, which was fun. And by the way, the yarn, I would have the students place, right? I would ask the questions and they would go ahead and place it. So I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to take away these as well. And I'm going to bring in, instead, these pictures that I have. Okay, so we have a common quadrilateral. We have a trapezoid. Let me move these over a little bit closer. Oh, and I wanted to put paper underneath so that we could draw it. So let me just move everything aside and we'll do this the right way. Okay, so I'm going to place my common quadrilateral right here. I'm going to place my trapezoid right there. I'm going to place my parallelogram right here. Okay, the arrow's going the other way. I'm going to place my rectangle right there, and my square right here, and my rhombus right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead. I have 6 color markers, and I'm going to go ahead and classify them again. All right, so before we started with the quadrilaterals, so we're going to make a nice big circle around all of them to show that they're all quadrilaterals. Okay. Next, I'm going to point out the trapezoid. I'm going to put that in its own little circle. Okay. Next is the parallelograms. The parallelograms are these 4. These are all parallelograms. Okay. And then the rectangles are the rectangle and the square. Those are my rectangles. Okay. And my rhombus or rhombi is going to be both the rhombus and the square, where the square is just a special kind of rhombus. Okay, and please remember that not all people will classify them the same way. Okay, you may, like I said, find different sources that I have samples in my album of all sorts of different ways of classifying quadrilaterals. This is one way that makes sense. And finally, by itself, we have our little square. All right, so we have our little square right there. Okay, so now we've put this in a form where the children can go ahead and copy this into their notebooks, and you may have them formulate, especially second and third levels, could maybe formulate or try to write definitions for each of these, because as you know, we haven't really introduced the nomenclature cards yet, so we haven't given formal definitions for these. But I would think that a second or third level could certainly write a few sentences about each one, describing the number of parallel sides, the number of equal sides, talk about the angles. I think that that would be certainly something that level 2 or level 3 certainly can do. All right, so that's the end of this lesson. Now there is a presentation I want to show you that comes right after this, that I think comes right after this. I don't think it's in the album, but it is such a fun thing that I think it needs to be done. So, and that is similar to what we did with the triangles. We want to build, work with the children to maybe build all of the squares that they can with the sticks. It's a really fun activity for them. And you can actually just give it as an assignment. It doesn't even need to be the same time. But, you know, maybe have 2 or 3 or 4 kids work together. They build all the squares and they can stack them up like this. Okay? And they can, here's another picture of how they can stack them. All right, so these are really beautiful. Okay, and then after that, you can have them build all the rectangles that they can and lay them out and see what they can build with them. Okay, so these are really fun activities that you should make sure your children do. All right, that's it for now.